When the front door slammed open at 2 in the afternoon, I thought the wind had kicked it loose again. Instead, a stranger stood in my hallway, shoes on my rug, chest puffed like he owned the place. He shouted my name with confidence, not fear, and announced that his mom ran the HOA. He said he was here to inspect my house, and if I interfered, fines would follow. That was the moment I realized this day would end with sirens, not apologies. I live on the edge of a quiet development, the kind with matching mailboxes and too many rules. I'm not even a member of their HOA, a fact I'd explained repeatedly to a woman who treated authority like a family heirloom. Her son apparently inherited the attitude without the paperwork. He paced through my living room, filming on his phone, narrating violations he invented in real time. He opened cabinets, tugged at doors, and laughed when I demanded he leave. I told him calmly that he was trespassing. He smirked and said his mom would back him up. He claimed the HOA charter gave him access rights. I asked him to show anything official. He waved his phone and said that was proof enough. My heart raced, but I remembered one rule that mattered more than any HOA bylaw. My home, my consent. I stepped outside and called the police. From the porch, I could still hear him inside, boasting to someone on speaker about handling the problem. Neighbors gathered, curious but cautious, whispering the name everyone feared. When the patrol car arrived, the mood shifted instantly. The officer listened, nodded, and walked straight past me into my house. What happened next stunned everyone. The officer asked the intruder for identification. The bravado cracked. The story changed. The phone stopped recording. Within minutes, handcuffs clicked, and the claim that Mom runs the HOA echoed hollowly against the walls. As he was led out, he finally asked if this could all go away. It couldn't, and that was only the beginning. I didn't know then how deep the rabbit hole went, or how desperate people become when imaginary power is challenged. I just knew my quiet afternoon had turned into a public spectacle, and the truth was about to collide with entitlement. Stay with me, because the next chapter reveals what the officers uncovered about his mother, the HOA, and why this arrest triggered a chain reaction no one in the neighborhood expected. This wasn't just a bad decision by a reckless kid. It was the spark that exposed a pattern of abuse, threats, and lies that had been quietly poisoning the community for years. And once the truth surfaced, nothing stayed buried anymore at all. As the patrol car pulled away, the neighborhood exhaled. But the tension didn't disappear. It simply shifted. Within an hour, my phone started buzzing with messages from neighbors I barely knew, all asking the same thing. What just happened? I didn't have all the answers yet, but the police did, and they were asking questions that went far beyond a simple break-in. That evening, an officer returned to take a formal statement. He explained that the young man hadn't just trespassed. He'd forced entry, which escalated the charge immediately. When asked why he thought he had the right, the son doubled down on the story. About his mother controlling the HOA, he even claimed she'd sent him. Personally, insisting it was standard procedure. That claim caught the officer's attention because there had already been complaints about that same woman. Over the past year, several homeowners reported aggressive inspections, surprise fines, and threats of legal action. Most people paid just to avoid trouble. Others moved. What no one had realized was that many of these actions weren't authorized by the HOA at all. The woman had been acting alone, using fear and her title to bend people to her will. Her son's arrest turned those whispers into something louder. The next morning, 2 detectives knocked on my door. They asked for permission to review my security footage. I showed them everything. The forced entry, the threats, the filming. They nodded, exchanging looks that said this wasn't new information. They told me the footage matched a pattern they were already building. Apparently, my house wasn't the first place her son had inspected, just the first owner who called the police. By noon, word spread fast. The HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting. Notices went out denying any involvement in suspending the woman pending investigation. That denial didn't sit well with residents who'd been fined thousands. One by one, people came forward, sharing emails, voicemails, and handwritten notices signed with authority she never had. Meanwhile, the son sat in holding, waiting for arraignment. His calls went unanswered. The influence he'd relied on evaporated overnight. When he finally saw a judge, the charges were read plainly, without drama, and bail was set higher than expected. The claim that his mom ran everything meant nothing in that room. What shocked me most was the relief in the neighborhood. People waved, stopped to talk, and shared stories they'd been afraid to tell. The arrest cracked something open. Power built on intimidation only works when no one pushes back. And this time, someone had. What followed wasn't revenge, but reckoning, and the next chapter shows how the HOA tried to save face and how badly it backfired when the truth hit daylight. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for a Friday night, a time clearly chosen to limit attendance. That plan failed spectacularly. Cars lined the streets, people stood along the walls, and the room buzzed with anger that had been bottled up for years. I sat in the back, listening, realizing I wasn't just a homeowner anymore. I was a witness to something much bigger. The board president opened with a carefully worded statement about misunderstandings and isolated behavior. Before he could finish, hands shot up across the room. One woman stood and read an email threatening foreclosure over a paint color. A retired couple showed invoices for fines that didn't exist in the bylaws. Every story pointed to the same source, the woman who claimed to run everything, and the son who enforced it like a private enforcer. When the board announced she was suspended pending investigation, the crowd erupted. People demanded refunds, apologies, and explanations. That's when the board's attorney quietly asked for the floor. He explained that if even half the claims were true, the HOA could face lawsuits for fraud, harassment, and abuse of authority. The room went silent. This wasn't neighborhood drama anymore. It was legal exposure. Outside, news vans arrived. Someone had tipped off local media about the arrest and the meeting. Cameras rolled as residents spoke openly for the first time. The narrative shifted instantly. This wasn't about one reckless kid. It was about unchecked power, fear tactics, and a system that failed to protect people from someone hiding behind a title. The following week, detectives returned, this time with subpoenas. They requested HOA records, financial statements, and correspondence. What they found was disturbing. Funds collected as fines had been diverted into accounts controlled by the suspended woman. Some payments were marked as consulting fees. Others had no explanation at all. The son's arrest had opened a door investigators hadn't even been looking for. I received a call from the prosecutor's office asking if I'd testify. Saying yes felt heavy but necessary. The break-in was no longer an isolated crime. It was part of a pattern that supported larger charges. Trespass turned into conspiracy. Intimidation turned into extortion. And the claim that Mom runs the HOA transformed from a threat into evidence. Neighbors began organizing, sharing documents, and supporting each other. People who'd once avoided eye contact now exchanged numbers and plans. The power dynamic flipped. Fear gave way to resolve. The woman who once dominated conversations was silent, advised not to speak, her authority gone overnight. The son remained in custody as new charges were discussed. His arrogance had cost more than a night in jail. It exposed a network of abuse built on intimidation and silence. And just when we thought the fallout had peaked, the woman herself made a move that shocked everyone, forcing the case into an even darker turn that no one saw coming. 3 days before the woman was scheduled to appear before investigators, she broke her silence in the worst possible way. Instead of cooperating, she sent a mass email to the entire neighborhood, accusing residents of lying, claiming the police were biased, and insisting her son was set up. She warned that anyone who continued spreading false information would face legal consequences. The message backfired instantly. Several recipients forwarded the email directly to detectives. Others sent screenshots to the HOA attorney, who responded with a blunt notice, instructing her to cease all communication immediately. She ignored it. That defiance became critical, because investigators were already building a case, and her message crossed from denial into intimidation. The next morning, unmarked cars appeared near her house. Neighbors watched quietly as detectives knocked. What happened inside didn't stay private for long. Later that day, confirmation spread that a search warrant had been executed. Computers, phones, paper files, and financial records were seized. The woman who once terrified the neighborhood was now being investigated in her own living room. By afternoon, the prosecutor updated me. The email I'd received, along with others, was now evidence. Combined with financial irregularities and witness statements, it supported charges far more serious than anyone expected: fraud, coercion, witness intimidation. The case had escalated rapidly, and the arrest of her son was officially labeled the triggering event. Meanwhile, her son learned what was happening from inside the detention center. His lawyer requested an emergency hearing, hoping to reduce bail. The judge denied it. The reasoning was simple. New evidence suggested the family operated together. The claim that he was just following orders no longer helped him. It tied him deeper into the situation. The HOA board issued a second statement, this time apologizing. They admitted failures in oversight and promised full cooperation with authorities. For many residents, it felt too late, but it mattered. Lawsuits were being discussed, class actions explored, and restitution calculated. The neighborhood was no longer fractured by fear. It was united by accountability. One evening, a neighbor knocked on my door with tears in her eyes. She told me she'd nearly lost her home years. The final revelation came from a box no one had opened in years. During a routine review of archived HOA records, investigators found old meeting minutes from nearly a decade earlier. Buried between landscaping approvals and budget votes was a quiet amendment that changed everything. The woman had never been properly elected. She'd been appointed temporarily after a board member resigned, and that temporary role was never ratified. Her authority had expired years ago, but no one noticed because no one dared question her. That discovery shattered her remaining defenses. Every fine, threat, and inspection she authorized after that date was illegitimate. The money she collected wasn't HOA revenue. It was personal gain. The intimidation wasn't enforcement. It was criminal behavior. When prosecutors laid this out, the case became airtight. She was arrested without fanfare on a Tuesday morning. No emails, no warnings, just handcuffs and silence. The charges were extensive, and the evidence overwhelming. Her son was transferred to county jail to await trial on multiple counts, including burglary and conspiracy. The phrase he'd shouted so confidently, "My mom runs the HOA," was now quoted verbatim in court filings. Not as power, but as proof. The HOA itself was placed under temporary management. Refunds were issued. Fines were voided. Policies were rewritten with transparency baked in. For the first time in years, residents attended meetings without fear. People spoke freely, laughed, and planned block parties instead of escape routes. As for me, life slowly returned to normal. The door was fixed. The house was quiet again. But something had changed permanently. I understood how fragile peace can be when authority goes unchecked, and how quickly it collapses when someone finally says no. Months later, verdicts were handed down. Guilty pleas replaced grandstanding. Sentences followed facts, not titles. Justice didn't arrive loudly, but it arrived fully. The neighborhood healed. Not because someone was punished, but because the truth was finally acknowledged. Looking back, the break-in feels surreal, like the opening scene of a movie I never auditioned for. But it taught me a lesson worth sharing. Power only exists when people believe in it blindly. The moment it's challenged with facts, it crumbles. If this story proves anything, it's that standing your ground matters. One phone call changed everything, and sometimes, the fastest way to stop a bully is to let the law do what intimidation never expects. If you'd like, I can now help you with a viral YouTube title variation, thumbnail text, or opening narration rewrite to maximize retention and clicks.